You literally just popped out now. I don't know. Safe driving, mate. Lee.
Oh, he's left. Really joy.
Okay, I think we're good.
Perfect. No, lovely. Good morning to you, Mark, and thanks for coming on here. Really, really appreciate it. Good to see you again. Obviously, you performed at the 178 Comedy Club with us before, so it's lovely to see you and speak to you again. How have you been? What have you been up to?
Yeah, good. I'm furiously getting ready for Edinburgh at the moment. I'm off there
Yeah, of
next
course.
week to spend nearly the entire of August up there doing shows. So it has all been a little bit chaotic getting ready for that, to be honest. I had my final preview last night, and yeah, I sort of am tentatively feeling. Actually, that's a lie. I don't feel ready at all.
Well, you were there last year as well, wasn't you? I remember. It seems to come round so fast.
Yeah,
I think you
absolutely.
had a show there last time, didn't you?
I did, and I don't know if this is a good idea or not. We will find out. But I'm taking last year's show back again, and
Yeah,
also doing a brand new show on top of that,
yeah.
and also running a compilation show every day. So it's going to be 3 shows a day, which is
Oh,
going to be fairly hectic. But I think my view is, to be honest, and it's not a romantic sort of creative one. It's if you're going to be up there, it costs you so much to go. You might as well have as much going on in the day to try and earn a bit of
yeah,
money
I
back
agree.
and just fill your day with as many gigs as possible.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's fantastic, and it's good that you're out there bloody doing that. I mean, it's really impressive from someone looking from my side of the fence. But yeah, um, well, let's kick off then. There's no one to introduce yourself better than you, so I'll let you go ahead. Can you tell the guys who'll be watching a little bit about yourself?
So I am Mark Rowe. I've been a comedian for the last 7 years. I am also a teacher in my day job, and last year's show was all about being a teacher in my day job. It is obviously a rich, fertile ground for material. I got into comedy, as I said, 7 years ago, in a slightly unusual way, I think, because I actually made a documentary about becoming a comedian from never having done a gig to taking a show to the Edinburgh Festival in the space of a year. And that was it was called The Long Road to Edinburgh, and it really was a long road in. And to be honest, when I made that film, I was into kind of making films. We'd made a short horror film before. I hadn't made documentaries before, just messing about with my mates. And I genuinely thought this is something that I'll make an interesting film about. And then at the end of the year, I will move on and I'll make more films. And I just didn't. I fell in love with performing comedy over that year and stopped making films about it and wasting time on that. And instead
Yeah.
just focused on performing as much as I possibly could.
So, okay, so obviously you decided to do this. You decided to do this short film, The Long Road to Edinburgh. But you've. I mean, so what? You've just got this equipment, laying in your house. Is it something that you had to go out and find and source? And
I was quite so. I had a couple of mates who were into sort of similar things. So we had enough equipment we had a camera, we had the good enough equipment to record sound if we were interviewing people,
right,
and then we went and bought a second camera for like 200 quid or something like that. So the whole it's a feature length film. It's a 90-minute film, but it's made on a absolute shoestring budget.
yeah,
And
I think I've seen it actually. I do remember giving it a view actually. Yeah, I do remember.
it's funny how when I say yeah, it was made on a shoestring budget, you're like, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, no, but it's good. It's it does the job and it does exactly what it says on the tin, and it's good. It's a documentary style. Um, and in actual fact, I thought, did you start doing some podcasts after that? Was that something that you?
I did a
Because
little
I
bit,
think
yeah. I did a little. I've done a couple of things. As a comedian, you're always trying out new and different ways to
yeah,
kind of reach an audience and find people. I did a couple of things where I did the Long Road to, and I would record sort of what was going on in my head as I went to different gigs. So after the Long Road to Edinburgh, I'd do like, I don't know, the Long Road to Bromsgrove, and I would record on my journey
yeah,
a little bit of what I was thinking and put that out as a podcast. I also did with a good friend of mine, Andy Gleeks. We did during COVID. We did the Inane Campaign podcast, which was good fun. Where we went on. We realised that Change.org, which is obviously set up for creating petitions to raise important issues and draw attention to campaign for really good causes. But also, if you spend any time looking around on Change.org, there is a whole load of just stupid petitions that people have tried to get people to support ridiculous causes. And we made a podcast about those. So we would talk about the ones that we found every week, but we would also set up our own petitions for ridiculous things. Like I had one to a campaign to make the Isle of Man, rename it to be the Isle of Person. You know, it's like stupid stuff like that. And then we would spend the week trying to get as much support for our campaigns as we possibly could, trying to beat each other with the amount of petition signatures that we got. It was a ridiculous thing to do.
So you're anarchists, then. You're creating anarchy.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, it was good fun. We started to get quite annoyed at each other. There is, and we made a rule early on that you can on Change, as you can with all sort of social media things, pay to promote your campaign, and then it gets in front of lots of people. So we made a rule that you weren't allowed to do that. But somebody else backed one of Andy's campaigns and put some money into it, and I was furious. We had quite a big row on the podcast about how out of order that
was. We ask quite a lot of people with, how do you go about starting out in comedy? Obviously, you've done this now for several years, but it sounds like through what you were doing there, it allowed you to find your voice and your unique place in that pitch off point when you were starting out.
Yeah, I guess so. I think the whole thing about finding your voice I find quite difficult, because I know that people talk about that a lot, and I have never been 100% sure that I've found exactly what my voice in comedy should be, and I still feel that it's developing a little bit and it's changing a little bit, and I say that having the latest show that I've written. So where I said I'm doing 2 shows in Edinburgh, I feel like the second one is quite different in style, and I don't know quite where I sit still. I tell you, I think the thing that probably helped develop me as a comedian most, in terms of certainly being comfortable on stage, if that is somewhere close to finding your voice, is being comfortable on stage and being able to relax and be able to just in some way put a lot of yourself across, was MCing. When I started to MC, I think that was a noticeable difference in me as a comedian, as the sort of things that I was talking about on stage, and it had an impact. So I was MCing sort of new material nights to begin with, and so you're on stage quite a lot. You're going back. On a new material night, you might have 8 or 9 acts going on, all doing shorter spots. So you're on stage a lot and you're carrying the night. And I really felt like that helped me develop as a performer, and also not just as an MC. So I would MC, and I felt like I was getting better at that. But noticed also when I was going back to doing a set that somehow that had improved as well, because I just felt much more comfortable, much more relaxed, much more able to be fluid on stage and interact with people and drop in and out of bits of material.
Is that because as an MC you're almost having to set the tone, aren't you? You've got a bit more control to in terms of how you want the room to feel, and you're almost drawing up in your head where to go, where to look, and from those initial sort of 5-10 minutes, I presume, when you're opening the show, you can really feel what the energy is going to be like, and then gauge just how you need to be the next time that you come out.
Yeah, there's definitely an element of being able to work things out, and you've got a safety net a little bit as an MC, because it's not expected by a lot of audience members that you're going to be incredibly funny. The amount of time that you hear, the amount of times that you hear an audience member will come up at the end and go, "Oh, you should have a go at being one of the comedians. You were funny as well." And they sort of don't expect that to be part of your job is to get the audience laughing. So you've got a little bit of leeway with that, but you can definitely go and test things out. But it does mean, because of that expectation, that the pressure's off a little bit. When I did the documentary, I interviewed a guy called Paul Revel, who I think is one of the best MCs in the country. And he just said, just be likable. As long as the audience like you, as long as you're warm and friendly, if you make them laugh, that's a bonus. But actually your job is to just make them feel comfortable, settled, ready for comedy, and then get the acts on. And I think that was very, very good advice. Obviously it helped if you're funny as well. But
do you think so? Moving on to more sort of advice for people now. Do you think, and I'll start with more that to avoid? I think.
Sorry, Dan, you cut out then. I couldn't hear the question. Sorry.
Can you hear me okay? Okay.
It's come back in now, so yeah.
Yeah. I was born, so I just started new to this. What are the more common mistakes finding that new comedians to try and avoid?
Gone again, sorry. Also, my friendly neighbour has just decided, very nicely, but what a lovely bloke. He's cutting my grass, but he's doing it right outside my window as we speak.
So I'm struggling to hear. Good. It's all good. Okay. So as a new comedian, what do you think there are common? Do you think there are any common mistakes that new comedians should avoid when they're breaking into the network of comedy? Is that something that you?
Oh wow, that's a really good question, because people always come and go, "What should comedians do?" They very rarely come and say, "What should they not do?"
Okay.
I think there's a few things. So one is they have this kind of desperate need to create more and more material, rather than focusing on getting the material that they have got right. And very often you'll meet. I mean, I had one guy in particular asked us for his very first gig. Which we when we ran our new material nights in Marston Mortain near Milton Keynes, we were very proud to give several comedians their very first gig, but we would always make sure that the lineup was very balanced. But this one particular comedian came and said, "I want to do my first gig," and I said, "Well, I'll give you 5 minutes, and you can come and have a go." He said, "5 minutes? I've got about an hour." And I said, "You haven't got an hour. You haven't got an hour's worth of material." And a lot of new comedians, I think, because they sit and they think about being a comedian for quite a long time. I know I certainly did. I talked about doing comedy for a long time before I actually took the leap into doing it. And I think they probably think about it whilst they're thinking about how good it would be to be a comedian. They're coming up with jokes, but they're not necessarily jokes that will work properly. So I think they need to spend some time working on that 5 minutes, at the very best jumping up to 10 minutes, but not really trying to go much beyond that, certainly for quite a long time. Having said all of that, this comes from somebody who in his first year went, "I'm going to do a show in Edinburgh." So I did.
Well, you did it. You did it.
So it was a 45-minute show, and on the show I did half an hour, and I got somebody to do another 15 minutes. And the story was, it was somebody I'd met along the journey on the long road to Edinburgh, and the people that had helped me out. But I would, as you said, I wouldn't say that's advisable. I don't think that half an hour was my best showing of myself. It got one review. It got 1 2-star review when I was up there. And the guy said, feels a bit like an open mic night or a new act night. And it was. I wasn't a professional comedian. I was
Yeah.
I was 11 months in, 90-something gigs in. You're not going to be able to go and deliver to a really good level over a sustained period in that amount of time. It's impossible. I tried. I don't think I achieved it.
You said just a second ago that you thought about going into comedy for a long while. Now, Now, what was it that was stopping you getting into it? Was it because you didn't know? Well, I'll let you sort of. What was
I was
stopping you from
scared.
getting
I
into
think I was
that?
scared. My background was so I'm a drama teacher, and I had done lots of acting and performing. Um, so I was used to being on stage, but I think I was scared of stand-up's very personal. You know,
Mm,
if people aren't laughing, then you feel like they don't like you, right? And it's putting
yeah.
yourself up to be judged. And I think I was scared. I was scared of standing in front of people and saying, "This is what I think is funny," and them not agreeing,
Mm,
and scared of dying on my ass, to be honest. But again, I know I keep coming back to it, but the documentary was like my safety net, because the documentary made me able to go, if I'm terrible at this, that's still a good story. That's still an
yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
story that I can share with people. So it gave me the confidence and the courage to kind of go, okay, I can put myself out there, because if it's bad, then actually that's okay. Um, Ironically, we didn't we didn't get a bad gig on camera for ages, and that's not to say I wasn't having them, but I obviously couldn't film every gig, and
Yeah.
it just kept being that the gigs that I was doing were going okay. I didn't have an absolute shocker, and I can remember going and doing this gig in London at 2 p.m. in the afternoon. So it's quite early on for a comedy gig. You haven't got people who've had a drink yet and loosened up.
Mm.
There was daylight just streaming through the windows. It was a really weird environment to be gigging in. And I died on my ass for 10 minutes, like properly didn't get a reaction from people for 10 minutes, and filmed it on my own. And I remember going outside to speak to my brother, who had been coming along and filming a lot of the gigs for me. And
Mm.
I went, we've been trying to get a bad gig. I've absolutely nailed that. And I could pretty much hear him punch in the air with delight. So in that moment when I've just died on my ass and he's celebrating the fact that we finally got it on camera, while I feel absolutely awful that I've had a horrendous gig. But
That leads me on to my next question really. So as you are probably aware, the comedy industry or the music industry or any sort of entertainment industry, it can be mentally and emotionally taxing. Um, what I'm going to ask you is, how do you take care of your mental health? But I think viewers would like to hear that, but also how to um, any tips on how to look after your mental health.
that's a really good question. I have a very good support network, both inside and outside of comedy. So I've got my wife is incredibly supportive and allows me to come home and let off steam with the things that
Yeah.
haven't gone well and the things that are difficult. I've got some good friends who, on the long drive back from gigs, I can pick up the phone and speak to them and talk to them about what's going on. I think, to be honest, in terms of tips for preserving your mental health, it's all about making sure that you maintain some kind of life outside of comedy as well. It can become very much all-consuming very quickly, and there are points. There are points when it is all-consuming, and it has to be all-consuming. Like I said, I've just been getting ready to go to Edinburgh. The last few days, building up to this my last preview last night, it's been really difficult to think about anything else. So today and tomorrow, it's really important to put it to one side, not be doing comedy, and doing something a little bit different and taking some time out.
No,
it having good people to talk to, not allowing yourself, and this is particularly difficult at the beginning, but not allowing yourself to think that it's incredibly important that every gig is perfect. There's a saying that's very common among comedians where you either have a good gig or a gig where you learn. And that's really important to take on board, that you'll get something out of gigs regardless of whether they go well or not. And also, the more you do gig and die and have bad gigs, which I'm pleased to say are fairly few and far between now, but they still do happen. And it's
and you think about that, and you do think about that before going on stage. That is I'm a musician, so you are thinking, just do what you know, Just do what you know, you'll be fine. And then you do it, and then you're fine. You know, it's not like I get anxiety or any stage fright. Really, it's
Yeah.
more the case of, you know, is the guitar going to break? Is the you know, it's all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. Really, you know, you're capable, but it's just
But also because you've had a bad one at some
mm,
point, everyone's had a bad gig. Because you've had a bad one, the next one doesn't hurt so badly. You know,
yeah, yeah,
and you can get to the point where you go, okay, I can chalk that off as a bad gig. Obviously, there's certain ones that you really hope go well. Um, Last night
yeah.
was a sort of A, it was brand new stuff, and B, it was a hometown gig. So there was quite a lot of faces in the audience that I was like, okay, I want this to go well because I'm going to have to see these people a lot. If I'm miles away from home, it doesn't have quite the same importance.
They don't know, do they? They don't know what's
No,
going on.
exactly.
So you said there, you know, not to be consumed in comedy. People that are wanting to do comedy, they want to be they want that feeling of being consumed in it. They do that.
Yeah.
That's because they don't know about the circuit. They don't know. Um, where can they go if you don't do comedy? What's the best route into it? You know, the easiest route, and or rather the simplest route into it. Is it going down to your local club, or you know, what would you say?
So there's a couple of things. I did a course. Well, I took a comedy course in Camden. So it was 6 weeks, every Sunday afternoon for 6 weeks. Go down, workshop, and so they show you how to put together your first 5 minutes. So if you're
Mm,
not really sure where to start and what to do, then that's a really good place to start. And there are more and more courses popping up all over the place. I
mm.
believe there's also online courses now. So if you can't get down to
Yeah,
London
of
easily,
course.
or there's not one in the local area, there's stuff online that you can go and do. Meet up with other people. I think it's good to, when you want to start out, try and find the comedy community, whatever that means, wherever you are. So it might be going and doing a course. It might be looking for where the nearest open mic night is and getting yourself down there, going and speaking to whoever's running that night, talking to them about how, you know, what the process is for, because some open mic nights still, I believe, is fewer and far between. You
Mm,
can literally turn up and sign up at a particular time, and then you'll get to go on stage.
yeah.
More often than not, they are they're booked in advance. So it's still a new act night or a new material night, but you've got to have been asked to come along by the person who's running it, and they'll give you 5 minutes. So go to comedy, go and watch comedy and speak to whoever's running it, talk about what nights are running. There is a kind of network of comedians, but there's also a network of promoters and people who are putting on these nights. And they're not
Mm,
afraid to say, well, we run this night, but also you could go to that night down the road, or you could go to this
mhm.
night. But they'll be able to tell you what's out there. And if you do want to kind of immerse yourself in comedy, then that's the way to do it. Go to as many nights as you can, start getting on gigs and do as many as you can. Um, as I say, have a little bit of time outside of comedy as well, but you can still gig 3 or 4 times a week and manage to have a couple of nights off to not be thinking about it. And I would recommend that when you're starting out. There's very little point, I think, doing a gig and then doing another gig 3 months later, and then doing another gig another 2 months down the road. You're not going to improve. I think you need to be kind of going out, doing it 2 or 3 times a week, so that you'll start to notice that improvement.
What's the best piece of advice you received, Mark, when you were starting out?
Oh, that's hard as well, because I was interviewing so many comedians trying to find out. I mean, I remember James Acaster saying to me, "Just don't be a dick. Don't be a dick." That was pretty much it. Don't think that you know. Don't think you know what comedy is until you know that you've done 20 gigs, and then you go, oh, I know what I'm doing now. I'm a
Mm,
comedian now. So you continue to learn right
mm.
the way through your career as a comedian. You will continually be learning and developing. So don't go in kind of claiming to be something that you're not. Always be aware of what's going on around you. Be ambitious. Be motivated to keep moving forward, but don't think you're there before you're there. And I think that was good grounding, really.
Um, is there money in comedy, Mark?
Yeah, there is. There is, but it's going to be a long time before you get to any.
Yeah.
And after 7 years, I'm now at a stage where comedy is sort of paying for itself, and I get a little bit more. So
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not just getting my expenses anymore. I might earn a little bit of money on it.
Yeah.
It's not, from my point of view, it's not enough for me to be a full-time comedian, which is the dream. That's what I'd love to do, is to earn enough money that I could do this and not have to go and teach in a secondary school anymore.
Really though, because that's what gives you a balance. That's what gives you a good balance, no?
Yeah, do you know what? I've thought about this, and I talk about this sort of semi-regularly, that I do say the dream is to be a comedian full-time. And I can, when I did the documentary, I talked to Stu Goldsmith, who himself is an absolute top-class comedian, but B, has a podcast talking to comedians and has talked to pretty much everyone in the industry who, who's ever done anything. He's spoken to them. And right at the end, he sort of flipped it. I was supposed to be interviewing him, and right at the end, he went, so if you do get 5 years down the line, let's say you make it, you're a full-time, I didn't, by the way, get there in 5 years, but it would have been nice. 5 years down the line, you want to be a full-time comedian, and that's what you do in this industry that is contracting, and it's getting more and more difficult to be a full-time comedian. That's what you really want, is it? And I went, yeah. And he just looked at me and went, why? And it really stayed with me.
Yeah.
Really stayed with me. And I do sometimes think the fact that I'm not full-time professional comedian actually makes the whole experience a little bit more enjoyable. Like if a promoter is slow to pay me, or if I have a month where actually I haven't got loads of gigs in the diary, that's not terrifying to me. Because I'm not relying on it. So, going to gigs is because I've chosen to go and do a gig, not because I have to go and do a gig, because otherwise I can't pay the mortgage. So there is an element of me that says, I'm really having a lovely time doing what I do. Do I want to make it full time? But that said, on a dark December morning, when you're getting up and going in to face a classroom full of 30 year 9 students, I'm thinking, yes, I want a comedy club. That's what I want to do, is be in comedy.
It's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you. I'll just leave it with, obviously we know you've got Edinburgh coming up. Is there anything that you want to tell people about? Just leave a few more, a little bit more information about what you've got coming up.
So it is everything. All of my mind is focused towards Edinburgh at the moment. I've got 3 shows a day up there. I'll be doing my brand new show, Don't You Know Who I Am, which is all about being famous when I'm not famous, which, again, came from one of the kids in school. So maybe I shouldn't give up teaching, because that was something that they said. I've got my other hour show that I did last year called A Star in the Making. We've neatly called it Revision Lesson, because it's all about being a teacher, but I've come back to it for this year and talked about what's gone on this year that's changed. And then we do Jokers in the Pack every day, which is a load of fun, because we have loads of different comedians on every day. So we've got a whole range of different people, different styles. And what we say is we shuffle the pack every day. So we've got different comedians coming on doing shorter sets. So if you come and see them and you like them, you can go and watch their hour show later on in the day. So loads of stuff. And if people are up in Edinburgh, then it would be lovely to see some of them.
Lovely. Thank you again, Mark. We'll catch up with you soon.
No problem. Yeah, good.